All right. Richard, I see you've jumped in here. Can you let me know, are you hearing me okay? Are you hearing me as I talk? Okay. All right. Good. All right. Well, it's 8 o'clock. We will get started. Let me turn on my do not disturb so that we don't get interrupted here. All right. All right. Well, we're ready to get started tonight. We've got people coming in on YouTube, got people coming in on Facebook. And so everything seems to be working this week with both platforms. Man, I'm excited about that. So, all right. Yeah, adjust the camera without knocking it over. Well, I want to welcome everybody to Let's Talk Recovery tonight. Hey, man, it's good to see you. Good to see you. Tonight, what we're going to be talking, first off, let me just start with this. I've had a rough week. All right, get everything out in the open here. I've had a rough week. I think I shared last week that my MacBook had gone down. It's still down. I'm doing this on a little different setup. And all this is happening right as I'm getting started, getting used to doing this as a simulcast. But everything seems to be working this week. And then I also have been having some issues. I thought I was going to have some minor outpatient surgery today. Turns out that I did not have to have that, but I'm going to be going to see a wound specialist on Thursday. And that's had me a little bit dysregulated, a little bit anxious, but I'm here and yeah, things are going well. So tonight, we're going to be talking about a topic that I'm calling when I become my own higher power. Now, when I say that, becoming my own higher power, I'm not talking about self-confidence. I'm not talking about healthy responsibility or taking ownership of my life. Those things are important and those things are good. What I'm talking about is something different. In recovery, we often say that addiction is a control problem. And many of us that are in recovery spent years trying to manage our lives, manage our emotions, manage our relationships, and manage even our recovery through our own willpower. Most of us exhausted ourselves with that, trying to manage recovery through our own willpower. And we believed that if we could just think hard enough, if we could just read the right book or listen to the right podcast, if we could just work hard enough or try hard enough, we could finally fix ourselves. And I got to tell you, I battled that for years, believing that I would find a way to get my act together, to get my act under control. The problem with that kind of struggle, maybe you're familiar with the term white knuckling. The problem with that kind of struggle is at some point we stop trusting God. We stop trusting other people. We stop trusting the recovery process. And we begin trusting ourselves above everything else around us. We become the final authority. We become the one who decides what's true, who decides what's safe, what's necessary, and what we need to do next. So, in other words, we become our own higher power. And there are a lot of different ways that that can look. It can look like or sound like statements like, well, I know what everybody's telling me, but I'm going to do it my way. Have you ever said that? Have you ever heard somebody else say that? Or it can sound like, I've got this. I've got it. I can do it. I've got this under my control. It can even look spiritual. A lot of us are really good at spiritualizing things. We might talk about trusting God while quietly acting like everything depends on us. Um, I've even seen it with some people where people will talk about things like, well, I just have to keep myself so busy that I don't have time to get in trouble or to act out. I don't have time to relapse. And some of these things might work for a little while. For instance, keeping myself so busy that I don't have time to act out. That might work for a little while, but it won't work for long because we exhaust ourselves and then we fall. The irony to all this is that many of us came into recovery because self reliance wasn't working. But one of the easiest things to do is to turn recovery itself, the whole recovery process, into another self improvement project where we're still sitting on the throne. We're still trying to control. We're still trying to convince ourselves and everybody around us that we know what we're doing and that we can do this by ourselves. Can you relate to what I'm saying there? I mean, for me, that that very the very process that I'm talking about there is something that I was caught up in, and the way that I presented to myself and to others for years while I struggled with addiction. Ah, proactive surrender and connection throughout the day, putting my faith into action. That's right. Many people in recovery believe that their biggest problem is the addiction itself. But underneath the addiction is often a number of things that go much deeper. Underneath the addiction, many times, are things like self reliance or fear, control, isolation, or the belief that I have to carry life on my own, that I have to take care of things myself. And tonight, I want us to take a look at this idea, the idea that when I attempt to do everything on my own, I can begin making myself my own higher power. I begin putting myself into the position of attempting to be my own God and my own Savior. So, where I want to begin tonight, what I want to go to first is I want to go back and take a look at the first 3 steps of the 12 steps. Do you remember what those are? Step 1, we admitted that we were powerless over our addiction. Admitted that we were powerless. Step 2 says that we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. A power greater than ourselves. You notice it doesn't say that if I work hard enough, I can do it on my own. And then step three says that we made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to that higher power. Now, the 12 steps are not simply behavior management. That's not what they're about. The 12 steps, and especially the first 3, are an invitation for us to step out of self sufficiency. We're admitting that we can't and that we don't have to do this on our own. We don't have to do this by ourselves. In essence, it's an admission that we're not big enough to be our higher power, that it's going to take something outside of ourselves to be able to do this. And so, a lot of people stop. Even for some people, when they enter into recovery, they'll experience periods of um, sobriety. That's the word that I'll use. Periods of sobriety where they're not acting out, but they're still trying and working to control everything. And we work to control things through things like willpower or things like fear. Fear becomes a motivation for us. I know people that, for instance, the wife gives them an ultimatum. Whatever the addiction is, you've got to quit drinking, you've got to quit smoking weed, you've got to quit acting out sexually, or you're out and this marriage is over. And so the wife gives an ultimatum, and out of fear, we try to manage things. Um, Sometimes we stop acting out in an attempt to practice image control. We don't want to look bad. We chase after ideas like perfectionism or spiritual performance. I hear a lot of people that spiritual performance becomes a big deal. If I just read my Bible more and I need to pray more and I need to be in church every time the doors open. And none of those things are bad. None of them are bad. But when we take that kind of approach, we turn those things away from what they're meant to be, which is an opportunity for God to speak into our life and to change us. And we turn those things in to an attempt to work out our own deliverance, our own salvation, our own sobriety. Or some people even turn to isolation as an attempt to control things. If I can just get away from everybody. And the truth is, things like that, efforts like that, may create temporary sobriety. But eventually, exhaustion shows up. We wear ourselves out trying to do all these things. We wear ourselves out, we wear ourselves down. And when we get worn out, when we get tired, we become weak and we're not able to stay focused on all those works, and relapse takes place. Can you relate to what I'm talking about there? So, One of the first things that we need to understand this evening is that addiction began in our lives as an attempt to experience relief. And that addiction that we turn to, no matter what that addiction is, that addiction in the beginning worked for us. We were struggling with feelings, we were struggling with stress and pressure, we were struggling with insecurity about ourselves, and we turned to a behavior, drugs, alcohol, sex, and porn, gambling, whatever it may have been. And the addiction worked. It provided some temporary relief. Now, here's the problem is that it didn't provide that relief in a healthy way. It didn't provide that relief in a way that was sustainable, but it solved the issue temporarily. It gave us some peace, it gave us some comfort for a moment. So, some examples of that might be that the substance or the behavior that we turned to may have numbed our pain for a while. It may have taken the loneliness or the fear or the shame or the anger and blocked that temporarily. The substance or the behavior may have reduced temporarily anxiety in our life. It might have distracted us from shame. It might have soothed loneliness, maybe created a means of escape or provided comfort for a time. Maybe our behavior or our substance created temporary confidence, created a period where things didn't seem so bad. Now, people will argue with me on occasion that their addiction, their substance or behavior of choice didn't bring them any relief. But I'm going to tell you, if you really believe that, you're deceiving yourself. For the drunk on the curb, the alcohol is still doing something for him, or he'd stop returning to it. For the sex addict or the porn addict, going to that massage parlor, turning to that pornography provides comfort for a moment. If it didn't, we wouldn't keep going back to it. It does provide comfort for a moment. And we have to come to a point to where we're able to admit that to ourselves. Grace, not performance. That's exactly right. That I'll go back. There's a verse that I throw out there all the time, Romans 2:4. Do you not understand that it's the kindness of God that leads us to repentance? It's not shame, it's not judgment. It's God's kindness that leads us to repentance. So, with addiction, with our struggles, addiction is often an attempt to solve a real problem, but we're attempting to solve it with a destructive solution. That's what the addiction is. It is an attempted solution, but it creates its own cost and its own damage over time. Going back again to the phrase that I throw out here every week, behind every behavior is a feeling, behind every feeling is a need. That's an important line to keep in mind. The behavior is what we get focused on. The addiction, the drugs, the alcohol, the porn, the sexual behavior, that's what we get focused on because that causes the immediate pain. But that behavior came from feelings that were present that were causing us discomfort previously that we didn't know what to do with. And behind those feelings are needs. And those needs are valid, those needs are real. And most of those needs have been present many times since childhood. They've been present for a very long time. But we've lost track of the needs because the feelings causes problems and we turn to a behavior. Now, if our addiction became the thing that I trusted for relief from those feelings, which are stemming from those needs, then I want you to consider if the addiction became the thing that I trusted for relief, then our addiction can slowly become what I functionally worship, what I come to believe that I can't live without, what I come to look to for all of my answers. Now, we don't do this consciously. Well, none of us would say, well, I look to alcohol. I look to alcohol for my salvation. Alcohol is what I worship. But if every time we experience a need or every time we experience pain, we turn to alcohol, then alcohol has functionally become our savior and the thing that we worship. If pornography and sex is that thing that we turn to when we're struggling in some way, loneliness, shame, fear, if pornography and sex becomes that thing that we turn to regularly, then in a practical sense, that pornography and that sexual behavior has become the thing that we worship. It's become an idol in our life. It's become, in a practical sense, what we worship as God. It's not a conscious decision in our mind. I don't say I want to worship drugs as my God, or alcohol as my God, or sex and pornography as my God and my Savior. But in a practical sense, that's what we're saying. We're saying this is what I choose to run to and where I choose to look for relief when life hurts. What do you think about what I'm saying there? Are you struggling with it? Are you wanting to push back on it? Are you willing to consider that there may be some truth? That behavior, that substance has, under the surface, become an item that we worship. Now, here's why these things, along with self-reliance, feel safer. Most people don't become self-reliant because they're arrogant. Most people become self-reliant because the idea of trust, the idea of trusting other people or trusting something outside of myself became dangerous. And many of us have experienced things in our life where that's the truth that we've learned. If I need help, I have to do it myself. If 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 I need comfort, it's up to me to find a way to provide it. I can't count on anybody Nobody, I can't rely on anybody to come through for me on a regular basis. That's the way, that's the process that many of us have learned through life. Many of you that are here now, or you that'll be listening to this later when it's posted, many of us that are here over our lifetime, maybe starting when we were infants, even, we have experienced things like betrayal. We've trusted people who should have cared for us, who should have shown interest in us, and they betrayed us. Many of us have experienced abuse. Yeah. I don't know if Blass is in here with us yet. Blass is one. When Blass, he won't mind me sharing this. Blass, when I first met Blass told me, he said, I don't trust anybody. The only thing I trust is my dog. And yeah, and that's what we've learned. Many of us have been abused, and that abuse may have been physical. That abuse may have been sexual. That abuse may have been psychological. For instance, you may have been told, you always screw things up. You're never going to be worth anything. You're never going to amount to anything. That's abuse. Many of us have experienced abandonment. Hey, Blass, I was just telling them, man, I know you won't mind it, but I was just telling them, I said, when I first met Blass was quick to let me know, I don't trust nobody. I trust my dog. But man, I've seen real growth in you, Blass. I've seen a real change in your heart, man. And so many of us have experienced abandonment. There are a tremendous number of single parent families in life today where a dad leaves or a mom leaves, whether they pack up and leave or whether a death takes place and all of a sudden a vacuum's there. And we experience that as abandonment. Many of us experience humiliation. Many of us have experienced inconsistency. When I meet one-on-one with people and we walk through um, attachment styles, we talk a lot about inconsistency. Maybe we grew up in a home where mom or dad, there were times when they were really good to us and really protective, really caring, but there were other times when they just didn't want to have anything to do with us. Inconsistency, emotional neglect. Something else that's common today is church wounds, where we get involved in a church. I can tell you, speaking personally, I was involved with a church where I shared some struggles with an elder in what I thought was confidence. And all of a sudden, the things that I shared had been spread through the whole congregation and it caused harm. It made me believe the world's not safe, church is not safe. And many of us have grown up in homes where there's family chaos. Now, kind of the core idea behind what I'm saying here is that for many of us, asking for help feels risky because in the past, maybe over the course of the majority of our lives, vulnerability has led to pain. And that is where I always say, we don't need to stand on a soapbox and air our struggles and our history with everybody that's around us. But what I can tell you is that all of us need a few people, even if it's just one or two. We need a few people where we can be open and honest and where we know they're going to listen to us and we don't have to fear judgment or shame. All of us desire that, but a lot of us believe it just doesn't exist. And so for many of us, we didn't choose self-reliance because we were strong. We chose self-reliance because dependence on anybody other than ourselves stopped feeling safe. What do you think about that idea? Have you struggled in your life with feeling like there was anybody you could be vulnerable with, and that could be a safe connection? Now, in our addiction, what many of us are looking for in our addiction is we're looking to attempt to control the situations around us because control appears to be temporary safety. A lot of times it appears to be long-term safety, but it's never long-term. At the very best, it's temporary. Isolation creates temporary safety. And then all of a sudden we find ourselves struggling with loneliness and disconnection. Addiction creates temporary relief. But over time, all three of these things, attempts to control the world around us, isolation from other people, and addiction, all three of these things over time become prisons that we get stuck in, where we begin to chase attempts to control everything around us. And what do we really control in life? Really? What do we really have control over? Isolation always makes things worse. Always makes things worse. I always go back to that movie Castaway when Tom Hanks was stuck on that island. And isolation results in some form of insanity. You remember Tom Hanks? He had that Wilson volleyball and cut his hand and left a bloody handprint that he thought looked like a face. And all of a sudden, he was having conversations with a volleyball. And I remember as he built that raft and escaped the island and that storm came up, that volleyball got washed overboard. And he went into full-blown meltdown, crying out for Wilson as if he had lost his best friend. But here's what I'm telling you, is what we see in that movie as he experiences isolation is an accurate picture of what we experience and put ourselves through when we move into isolation. And these things become a prison for us. So the question as we enter into recovery, the question that recovery slowly asks us to consider, three questions. Can I trust again? Can I trust again? Can I surrender? That goes back to the three steps where we started. The first three steps came to believe that a higher power could restore me to sanity. Can I surrender? And then question number three, can I let go of being my own protector and my own savior? Yeah. Isolation is a prison, man. I've been to prison. I've been to prison. And isolation is worse than walls. I watched people, I'll just share this real quick, personal observation. And this would apply to me when I was first released from prison, but I've watched men come out of prison And at least in prison, they had people around them that had committed the same kind of crimes. And a lot of times in prison, there was a place there where there were a few people we could be open and honest with. And then all of a sudden we get out and our families rejected us, the community rejects us. We're struggling to get work and we become isolated. And there was a period of time for me where the isolation that I was living in after being released from prison was worse. The isolation was worse than me being behind walls and a fence. So let's talk for a minute about white knuckling and exhaustion. Human beings can carry enormous weight. Sometimes I watch events on the internet and that kind of thing, weightlifting competitions. A friend of mine that lives in Ohio, he moved to Ohio about 5, 6 years ago, but we shoot texts back and forth every now and then. And after moving to Ohio, he's married. He and his wife both have really gotten into working out and weightlifting and all that kind of thing. And so, uh, man, he has recently been setting some new personal weightlifting records. And it amazes me how much weight people can lift sometimes. And some of you I know go to the gym regularly, and you could explain what I'm talking about better here. But what do they call a snatch and grab or something along those lines? And where they grab and they lift that bar and they throw it over their heads, and it's amazing how much weight they can do that with. But how long can they stand and hold that there? Not very long. Humans can carry enormous weight temporarily, but we can't carry that weight indefinitely. Yeah, I see you there. I've been isolated for the past 6 months since living on my own. That's difficult. When I came out of prison, man, I moved into a small apartment and was there for a number of years by myself. I'd go to work and be around people, but I'd come home to that apartment and dude, it was miserable because I was by myself. Um, I'm glad that you're being able to experience a closer time with the Lord than ever. Man, that's an amazing thing. I do want to let you all know too, well, some of you are in here just so that you understand. I see your comments, and next to your comments, I see your login name for YouTube if you're on YouTube, and it's the same on Facebook. But I don't know who some of you are because I don't recognize your login name. The old Blast there, he has his actual name, Blast Cardenas. Probably mispronouncing your last name, Blast. But I see you. But for some of you, I don't really recognize who you are. Richard, you got your name on there too, man. Anyway, back to what I was talking about. We can lift tremendous amounts of, yeah, Jerome, I knew that was you. I was hoping it was you. I thought that was you. Um, I was assuming it was you. Um, our bodies can do tremendous things in the short term, but not in the long term. That friend of mine I was telling you about, he successfully made a lift, lifted a new personal best, but there's a huge difference between making a lift and holding it forever. Michael. All right, man. I appreciate you giving me your name there, Michael. I got to be honest with you. I struggle with remembering people's names, though, all the time, too. I have 4 daughters, and when I talk to my daughters, I call out all 4 names just to make sure that I'm talking to the right one as we're interacting. And so, yeah, I'm glad you're here, Michael. Um, so that idea that we're able to carry a lot of weight, but not indefinitely. That's kind of the idea behind white knuckling, is that we may be able to experience some short-term sobriety, but we can't keep that up forever. We wear down, we become exhausted. Or what we do, there's a fella I know that he enjoys getting on people that go to AA meetings. He struggled for years with alcohol. A guy that I know struggled for years with alcohol, um, and he has not had a drink now in about 7 or 8 years. He didn't go to counseling. He didn't go to AA. He just made a decision, and he'll let you know that, and he'll tell you, "I'm not weak like the rest of you morons that have to go to groups, or that have to have a sponsor, or that have to do this and have to do that. I just quit with willpower." But let me tell you what I've seen happen with him. He hasn't had a drink, but man, he's not free. He's one of the angriest people I've ever met in my life. And what he's done is he's traded one struggle, alcohol, for insecurity and anger, and lashing out, rage, lashing out at everybody around him. When he was a drunk, he had friends. Now that he doesn't drink, nobody has anything to do with him because he's become such a mean, nasty person. And that's what happens with us. We can white knuckle for a while, but we get exhausted and we either relapse or we trade one addiction, one struggle for another. Have you seen that take place in other people's lives, or perhaps even in your life, where you've recognized that you traded one struggle for another? All right. So a lot of people can maintain sobriety temporarily through a force of will or through fear. If I don't get it together, I'm going to lose my job. If I don't get it together, my wife's going to leave and I'm going to lose my family. They find a short period of sobriety, temporary sobriety, through an adrenaline rush or through rigid control. A lot of guys that struggle with pornography fight to lock down all their devices. But I'm going to tell you a secret, and it's not really a secret. You're never going to find a way to lock down all your devices 100% if your struggle's pornography. You're just not. It's not going to happen. And eventually, life happens, grief comes, stress builds, loneliness comes back, or fatigue sets in. And that white knuckling will work until life becomes heavier than you're able to keep in the air. And then you're going to collapse. Now, exhaustion doesn't always have to mean failure. Sometimes when we experience exhaustion, when we white knuckle long enough and we finally realize we can't keep things going, sometimes that exhaustion can reveal to us that we're attempting to carry something alone that was never meant to be carried alone. Yeah. We can become complacent. We also have to lean on one another. We can't, it's like, I know a lot of you here, a lot of us are used to that statement, the opposite of addiction is not sobriety. The opposite of addiction is community. It's healthy community. I believe that to be true. And when it comes to things like white knuckling, eventually even strong people reach their limits, not because they're weak, but because they're human. So, man, I got to keep an eye on the time. I'm going to run out of time tonight. I'm going to talk for a minute about worship, surrender, and recovery. And here's a point that I want to make. Worship is more than going to church and singing a song. It's more than going to work and singing a song. Worship is what we trust most. Worship is what we turn towards when we're in need. And worship is what we build our lives around. Now, in addiction, we get caught up in false worship. In addiction, we worship relief. In addiction, I'm glad you're here, Michael. These are new for me on YouTube, man. I've been doing them on Facebook for a while, but there were a lot of guys that I know that don't have Facebook. And so I've come here, and you are here. Jerome's here. Richard is here. Man, and I'm glad you guys are here. Blas is here tonight. He's normally been on Facebook, but I think he jumped over here so that he could get in on the conversation, see what everybody's got to say. And so, yeah, in addiction, back to what I was saying here, in addiction, we worship many times, we worship relief. We worship control. We worship certainty or escape or self sufficiency. Recovery, on the other hand, recovery invites us into worship, but in new ways. Recovery invites us towards truth. It's like that idea of do the next right thing. Recovery invites us towards telling the truth. In order to be able to do that, we have to have safe community where we can be vulnerable. Recovery invites us towards connection with other people. Recovery invites us towards surrender. Back to the first three steps and that idea that I can't control my addiction, that I have to recognize that there's a higher power apart from myself, and then I have to be willing to turn things over to that higher power. The idea of surrender, and the idea that surrender doesn't mean that we're weak. In my opinion, surrender means that we are strong. We're strong enough to realize that we can win, but not by ourselves. Recovery invites us towards honesty and towards dependence. Yeah, the serenity prayer is a good thing. Here's the thing about dependence. A lot of people that I know struggle with the idea of dependence. A lot of times, and I've thought this myself, I don't want to be dependent on anybody. But when I make that statement, I'm not going to be dependent on anybody. What I'm really saying at the root of that is that I am all powerful and I can do this by myself. But my entire life experience tells me that's not true. But I still want to go back to that idea. And when we are able to recognize the dependence on good people, solid people, people that we can trust with our story, Dependence is a good, healthy thing. Community, and ultimately, recovery invites us towards God. Recovery always invites us God, towards God. Now, I'll tell you, many of us entered into recovery. I entered into recovery still worshiping the idea of control. I entered into recovery thinking I can lock things down. I can set up walls. I can build walls around myself, and I can control situations. I can control people. And I entered into recovery worshiping the idea of control. And all I did was end up changing the behavior until I exhausted myself, and then I collapsed into relapse. I'm going to have to start to kind of wind things up a little bit here, but I want to talk here in the last few minutes a little bit about the idea of surrender. And here's what I have come to understand, and what I believe I have to be able to understand, is that surrender is not weakness. Many of us have grown up being taught that surrender is weakness, surrender is failure. Surrender is not weakness. Surrender is honesty. Yeah, yeah. Surrender is honesty. Surrender is being able to recognize areas where I need help. Surrender is recognizing I have limits. There are things that I can't do. And until I am able to recognize that, I'm destined for failure. Destined for failure. Until I'm able to recognize I have limits. Surrender is recognizing I need help. And I'll tell you something, man, that I've been telling a lot of people here lately. We need to recognize that we need help, and we need to reach out for that help before we give in and act out. What good is it if we go ahead and relapse rather than make that phone call, rather than reach out to somebody? I ask people that all the time. People call me up. Man, I relapsed last night. I acted out this afternoon. And I'll always ask, who did you call? Well, I'm calling you. Well, why didn't you do that before you acted out? Why didn't you do that before you relapsed? It's because we've been taught, we've learned that we shouldn't need help. I need help. I have to surround myself with people that I'm able to reach out to. Another part of surrender is recognizing that I cannot heal by myself. I started out at the beginning tonight sharing that I had to go into the doctor today. I got an issue going on my leg. I got a hole in my leg, basically. Um, a cyst burst, and man, it's a mess. And I've been bandaging it myself, putting some antibiotic on it myself, but it's not going to heal in the way that it needs to. And runs the risk of severe infection if I don't go to the doctor. And I went to the doctor today, you know. If I'm out for a walk and I get hit by a car, but I refuse to let them take me to the emergency room, I'm not going to heal. I'm not going to heal in a healthy way. And the truth is, we cannot heal alone. I need you and you need me. And we need to be able to lean on one another. There are going to be times when I'm weak and I'm struggling and I'm leaning on one of you guys. And there are going to be times when you're weak and you're struggling and you're leaning on each other, or you reaching out and leaning on me. And a fourth thing in surrender is recognizing that I was never meant to carry ultimate control. And in reality, there is practically nothing that I control. I can say for certain there's nothing I control that's outside of myself. And if I'm really honest, there's not a lot that I control with myself. I've never been meant to carry ultimate control. So, man, I meant to print these out before I got on here tonight, and I've been caught up in some things and forgot to do some things. But gee whiz, what am I doing here? I got a couple verses that I want to share with you guys really quick as I'm closing up. You're going to have to give me some patience while I pull them up here. These are verses that speak to the idea that we don't have control, the idea that we cannot stand alone. The first one I'm going to go to is Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. Some of you have probably got this memorized. Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Don't rely on your own understanding, but in all your ways know him, and he'll make your path straight. I'm reading from the Christian Standard Bible. That might not be a version that you're used to, but it's one that I like. And that's what I'm reading from here tonight. I got another passage for you here. It's in Matthew 11, 28 through 30. This is another one that you may have memorized already. Jesus speaking. Jesus says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I'll give you rest. Take my yoke and learn from me, because I'm lowly and humble in heart, and you'll find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." That's Jesus saying, you're not meant to carry this by yourself. That's Jesus saying, I am here to carry that with you. I'm here to carry it with you. Romans 12, verses 1 and 2. Therefore, brothers and sisters, in view of the mercies of God, I urge you to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is true worship. We've been talking about worship tonight. Don't be conformed to this age, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, so that you can discern what's good, pleasing, and the perfect will of God. And then I have one last verse for you tonight. It is 1 Corinthians chapter 12 and verse 9. And again, this is Paul that's writing this, but he's writing what Jesus said to him in that encounter that he had with Christ. Paul says, but he said to me, and he's talking about Jesus, but he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you. For my power is perfected in weakness. Now, I got to tell you, of the 4 verses I've shared with you, that one is my favorite because there are times when I really, honestly, truly recognize how weak I am. And Jesus is speaking to Paul and speaking to you and me and saying his power is perfected in our weakness. But we have to be willing to admit that we're weak. We have to be willing to surrender to him. Here's my closing thought here. I'm going to wrap things up. First, I want to say God never asked us to be all powerful. God never asked us to be limitless. God invites us into dependence on him. Recovery is not just learning how to stop a behavior. Recovery is learning what I trust and what's safe to trust. Recovery is learning where do I turn when I struggle. Recovery is learning who I allow to help me carry the weight when it's too heavy for me. Because there's a lot in life that's going to be too heavy for me. And if I don't know where to turn for help, I will be crushed. So recovery is learning who can I trust to help me carry that weight. Recovery is learning whether I'm going to continue trying to be self-sufficient and trying to be my own higher power, or whether I'm going to recognize and admit that that higher power has to be outside myself. And in my life, that higher power has to be Jesus. You were never designed to carry the weight of being your own savior. You can't do it. I can't do it. So here's my question for you tonight. This is what I want you to take with you, what I want you to think about. Here's my question. Where do you find yourself most tempted? Towards self-reliance? Where do you find yourself most tempted towards relying on yourself instead of surrendering to God? Where's your biggest struggle today? Where deep down inside, you still want to say, I should be able to do this myself. I should be further along than this. I shouldn't have to ask for help. Where's that biggest struggle for you? That's my question for you. I want to thank everybody for being here with me tonight. I've really enjoyed being here. I've enjoyed the interaction. I'm thankful for each one of you that have been here, for the way you've interacted. I got to tell you, I didn't get interaction like this on Facebook. And the last few weeks as I've come to YouTube, I've liked the interaction, and I'm glad you guys are here. And I hope you keep coming back. I'll be back here next week, 8 p.m. Eastern Time. And I would invite you, if you haven't done so yet, I'd invite you to check out my website, rw-coaching.com. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave something here. You can shoot me an email at rwcoaching2@gmail.com. And yeah, thanks for being here tonight, guys. I've enjoyed interacting with you and being able to talk with you. And I hope you guys have a good evening. No problem, Michael.